And Florian is Hawaii. This is island of Oahu. Florian, am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Oahu. Florian, before you start, can you just tell about your community a little bit? So this is farming, and is it threefold community, or what is this?
It's been kind of an eclectic community, people from different backgrounds, including those related to anthroposophy. It's a farming-based community, farming and gardening. So they grow vegetables and sell some of them commercially, but also use them for the community itself. And the community is kind of a therapeutic community that's been working with especially people with mental emotional difficulties in the past. And more recently, working with the homeless in the area. It started out with the most vulnerable homeless women with children with 14 units. In the meantime, there's now 42 units aside from those on the same property. And there's an educational center there for helping these people to develop new vocations, how to deal with their finances and things of that sort. But it's a place where people from different spiritual backgrounds seek to come together and share resources and work towards a kind of community building. And the celebration of the festivals have been a very important ideal. I was more involved during the years. I was very much engaged in the architectural design and construction management part of the community. So there's a fair number of buildings out there where we tried to bring a bit of an anthroposophical organic touch to the architecture. But it's now grown into 4 different farm lots. 2 of them are close to 14 acres. The other one is about 12 acres. And anyways, that's part of the picture of that community. And I'm planning on getting more engaged to try to develop a mandala garden, which is meant to be a place where you can celebrate the 4 main seasonal festivals and have a setting that is helping that to happen. But it still has a lot of work to do to get that off the ground. But in the meantime, I do architectural design and construction management and that sort of work. And I have 3 children who went through the Waldorf. My wife is just going to retire from teaching this year after many years of teaching early childhood.
So it's Florian, and you served many years as vice president or vice general secretary of Anthroposophical Society in Hawaii, which is separate Anthroposophical Society from US, for example.
Yes, we have a different etheric geography over here, even though the Hawaiian Islands were included in the United States at a certain stage of its development. On a soul spiritual level, etheric geographic level, we have a very different quality here. And the Asians feel very much at home here. Pearl Harbor was, of course, a conflict in that regard, but I think there's about 48% or 38% Asians and 25% white people here at the moment in terms of demographics.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of diversity. But Rudolf Steiner indicated that there was a shift that was beginning in his time from the center of world evolution in Europe and the Baltic Sea area to the Pacific Ocean, and that was beginning to happen already in his time. So I think looking at the rise of China and the economic trade between the United States, the largest economy, and China, it's largely across the Pacific. And so I think building bridges from the United States to Europe on the one hand and the Pacific region on the other is an important task. So that we have the Pacifica Journal has been working with that. Van James, who is the former chairman, has been involved in editing that.
Dear friends, it's 7:02 in Chicago, and looks like it's a good time to start. Again, our dear guest is Florian Sydow from Hawaii, island Oahu, Anthroposophical Society in Hawaii. Dear Florian, it's over to you. Dear friends, please keep muted during the presentation. Thank you so much.
So I wanted to say a little bit about this thesis that was mentioned in the last announcement, where Rudolf Steiner had spoken about the culmination of the anthroposophical movement towards the end of the 20th century. And this is a topic that is somewhat controversial. Some suggest that it hasn't happened. And my view is that the Anthroposophical Society was substantially weakened through the infighting that went on after Steiner's premature death, which caused divisions in the executive, the Vorstand, which led to the ouster of Ita Wegmann, who was a very important collaborator of Rudolf Steiner, especially in the later years, and Elizabeth Vrede as well in 1935. And in that same year, the Anthroposophical Society was banned by the Gestapo in Germany, and the Christian community was also suppressed. So these taken together, I think, weakened the society. And my view is that the intention of the Christmas conference to unite the society and the movement, which was epitomized in Rudolf Steiner, and him taking over the presidency, that due to the burning of the Goetheanum, which adversely affected his health, he partly incarnated together with it, I believe, and that from then on his health deteriorated. So that was, the fire took place in 1922 at the turn of the year, the New Year's Eve, and it continued to burn into the beginning of that new year, 1923. And Rudolf Steiner had to struggle not to leave the earth together with that building. Edith Marion, who collaborated with the sculptural work, with the sculptural group, became ill, and she died not too long after, partly devastated by that event. So I think I call that in my thesis here, the Plan A led to this Christmas Foundation meeting, which I think continues to be extremely important esoterically. But I think that the uniting of the movement and the society failed to reach its intended, hoped for unity that resulted in a weakening of the society in this culmination at the end of the century. So this is some of these slides, let me just say, are have a fair bit of writing on them. Some of this I think is quite important. This is a little quote that I included in the introduction, where Steiner proclaimed, "This indeed is the time of great decision, the great crisis to which the sacred books of all time have referred, for in reality, the present age is meant." And one of those sacred books said to be sealed with 7 seals is the Book of Revelation, authored by the beloved disciple, sometime referred to as St. John the Divine. But Rudolf Steiner differentiated between the more exoteric content of the Gospels, the good tidings announced to all the world, and the more profound esoteric teaching contained in the apocalypse in the form of symbols. And he went on to say that there was a Rosicrucian way of reading the apocalypse, which only then could be made public. And it was during the following year that Rudolf Steiner first made public the 7 seals and columns as a decorative motif at the Munich Congress. And among the very last of his lecture cycles was the 18 lectures on the Book of Revelation and the work of the priest. And I believe the last of those was on the 22nd of September, and he gave his last lecture on the 28th, the last address. During the course of this cycle, he indicated that all of those who have taken the Book of Revelation into their eye and astral body with inner understanding have gradually been enshrining it in the ether body of the earth's aura, so that now the presence of Christ working on in the earth's aura provides this aura of the earth with its fundamental keynote. The revelation of the apocalyptic book, he says, thus contains the beginning of an initiation for Christendom. This revelation is a kind of early stage of initiation, not for the individual, but for the whole of Christendom. During the course of these talks, he also provided his listeners with a new consciousness soul interpretation of the Book of Revelation, which is very relevant to the times we are facing. For according to this interpretation, from 1840 to the turn of the millennium, the 6th trumpet would be sounding. And as humanity crossed over into the new millennium, the 7th trumpet would begin to sound. So we're in the time where the 7th trumpet is sounding. This is related to the 12th chapter of the Book of Revelation, where the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars, clothed with the sun, appears, and the great red dragon with 7 heads seeks to devour the child. But Michael, who can be seen as a son of Sophia, comes forward as her defender. And the battle then in the 1840s begins with Michael doing battle till 1879, when the dragon and his hosts were cast down to the earth and the Michael Age began. So this is the time when humanity began crossing the threshold, and we're still in the midst of that process in our time. So this here is a black and white photograph of the Munich Congress. You can see Rudolf Steiner in the front row, Marie Steiner next to him, and a few places over, Annie Besant, who was the head of the Theosophical Society at the time. And you can see in the back the columns and seals of the book of, related to the Book of Revelation. These were referred to as Rosicrucian seals. And they were later embodied in a building called the Mausbau, This was due to the fact that Karl Stockmeyer, a Waldorf teacher at the time, asked Rudolf Steiner where there was an architectural impulse embodied in these capitals, columns, and seals. And so Rudolf Steiner gave an indication for a building in the town of Malch. But it was meant to be just a model. So at the top right, you can see a person when they enter. Let me get to the next slide here. When they enter, they would go up some stairs, and there was a wall, a curved wall on which the pillars, the columns, the 7 columns with their capitals stood. So the actual floor of a full-size temple of this sort would be at the top of that wall. But this model, in order to get inside of it, this wall was built, and it's a miniature version. But Rudolf Steiner indicated that this was the first Rosicrucian temple on the actual earth. Formerly, the Rosicrucian temples were to be found in the astral world, and you would have to meet a Rosicrucian initiate to gain entry. Now, I wanted to just say something about what Steiner referred to as the 7 inexpressible, unutterable mysteries that he first revealed publicly at the Paris talks called Esoteric Cosmology, 18 lectures, where Edward Charest was the one who took the notes. And towards the end of that series, he gave these 7 mysteries, which were kept hidden within the brotherhoods in the past. They go back very far. And they apply to every 7-fold cycle of temporal evolution. The largest one being the planetary cycle of old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, and then Earth. So the Earth stage would be the 4th stage of this 7-fold evolution, and the mystery of birth and death. So this should say, instead of the mystery of death, it should be the mystery of birth and death on that 4th stage, not just the birth, mystery of death I'm noticing here. But the 5th stage is the mystery of evil. And since we are in the post-Atlantean epoch of the Earth, which is the 5th epoch, this number 5, this mystery of evil, comes into play during the course of these post-Atlantean ages. So the first post-Atlantean age, the ancient Indian, recapitulates the Polarian. The second, the Hyperborean, that's the Persian. Then the Egypto-Chaldean, Babylonian. The third is the Lemurian. And the first Earth stage is the Atlantean. That's recapitulated in the Greco-Latin age. But now in our age, we aren't just recapitulating the past anymore, but we're anticipating the future. The future meaning the transition to the Jupiter condition, the New Jerusalem, the golden city that's spoken of in the book of Revelation. And this seal here on the left appears as the 4th Rosicrucian seal, having to do with this mystery of birth and death that relates to the entire Earth evolution, but also to the 4th age of our post-Atlantean epochs. Here in the book, From Symptom to Reality in Modern History, Steiner shows how these 7 inexpressible mysteries apply to the cultural epoch. So he says the 4th cultural epoch, birth and death, is in the foreground, but in our 5th age, it's the mystery of evil. And today, when the Christ is destined to appear in the etheric body, when a kind of mystery of Golgotha is to be experienced anew, he said that evil will have a significance akin to that of birth and death for the fourth post-Atlantean epoch. In the fourth epoch, the Christ impulse was born out of the forces of death for the salvation of mankind. And we can say that we owe the new impulse that permeated mankind to the event on Golgotha. Thus, by a strange paradox, mankind is led to a renewed experience of the mystery of Golgotha in the fifth epoch through the forces of evil. Through the experience of evil, it will be possible for the Christ to appear again, just as he appeared in the fourth post-Atlantean epoch through the experience of death. So in this book of Revelation cycle and work of the priest lectures, lecture number 16, Rudolf Steiner refers to the two-horned beast in chapter 13 of the Apocalypse. And he stated that before men can grasp the etheric Christ in the right way, mankind must first meet and deal with the beast who will rise up in 1933. And Hitler, of course, rose to power in 1933 when Rudolf Steiner had prophetically anticipated that the second coming would begin. That's 33 years after the end of the Kali Yuga, which ended in 1899. So with 1900, we have the beginning of a new golden age, even though it doesn't quite look that way outwardly. So this can be seen as one of the ways that the forces of evil have sought to counter the second coming of Christ in the etheric, which was to begin to take effect in 1933. So as I said earlier, the Anthroposophical Society was banned in Germany by the Gestapo in 1935. So then down below here, he says, during the post-Atlantean age, in the fourth epoch of culture of the post-Atlantean age, the problem of birth and death was more connected with the human soul. But during our own time, the fifth post-Atlantean epoch, people will have to struggle with evil in the same elemental way in which they struggled with birth and death during the Atlantean age. The Atlantean age was the fourth period of the earth, fourth epoch, where birth and death for the first time really came to the fore, particularly through the control of the different forces of nature. The impulses that will lead to evil will send their influence into the world in an immense and gigantic form. And the opposite forces, the forces of good, will have to grow out of the opposition to evil. And man will have to draw the strength for this opposition out of spiritual sources. This will take place above all during the fifth epoch, when the exploitation of electrical forces, which will assume quite different dimension from those which they have assumed so far, will enable man to spread evil over the earth. And evil will invade the earth by coming in an immediate way out of the forces of electricity. So we have, of course, the internet, the World Wide Web, artificial intelligence. It's all based on the digital zeros and ones that underlie this programming. And of course, this Zoom session is made possible through these forces, but we have to learn to counter them. And this sculptural group, which was meant to be at the very center of the old Goetheanum, which sadly was lost on that tragic night of the burning. This is the only real heritage that still exists as a powerful artistic expression of what Steiner intended as a new way of approaching the mystery of good and evil, which is threefold rather than dualistic. I was brought up a Catholic, so that dualistic element, which we also see in Judaism and in Islam, plays a big role. But according to this threefold, it's the good is in the middle between two forms of evil, one being the Luciferic, the other the Ahrimanic. And in the first half of evolution of the earth, the Luciferic was in the foreground, related to the birth mysteries, but now in the second half, the death forces will go stronger and stronger. And Ahriman will lead over to the Azuric being, just like Lucifer led over to Ahriman. So in our time, the Azuric beings begin to play a role. So as mentioned previously, in the 1840s, humanity as a whole began to cross the threshold. So in the esoteric school, Rudolf Steiner related the following. He says, today, humanity as such is experiencing the meeting with the guardian of the threshold. This is also the beginning of the split of humanity, and this signifies a critical point in time at which we have now arrived. The forces that formerly streamed out of the spiritual beings into humanity are used up, are exhausted. We are now on our own and must now bring these forces out of our subconscious. The mystery of Golgotha will have happened for nothing if human beings do not use these inner forces, but rather reject them instead. That would bring about a total destruction of Earth evolution. And in the third karmic relationship cycle, which was addressed to the karma of the Anthroposophical Society, he says the following: to this, my dear friends, I would now direct your hearts. It is happening now that the comparatively single and uniform kingdom of the angeloi is being turned into a twofold kingdom of angeloi, a kingdom of angels with an upward tendency into the higher worlds and with a downward tendency into lower worlds. While the Michael community is being formed here upon earth, we can behold above it the ascending and the descending angels. Looking more deeply into the world today, one can perpetually observe these streams, which are such as to stir the heart to its foundations. So this is based on the understanding that because the Christ has entered the human realm, and the gift of anthroposophy flows from the countenance of Christ, Michael, the angels actually have something to learn, to absorb from human beings and be enriched by it, that allows them to rise up higher. But at the same time, there are those in this age of freedom, when we're all crossing the threshold, where this split in humanity is taking place, where there is a downward trajectory for those who embrace materialism, and they drag their angels down with them. So here's one of the seals, the fourth seal, that is related to the 10th and 11th chapters of the book of Revelation, when the sixth trumpet, which began to sound in the 1840s, was underway. And in this 11th chapter, there is the angel asks John, who beholds this vision, to measure the temple. And this is the measuring of the temple of Solomon. And at the entry to Solomon's temple are these two pillars, and Yachin and Boaz. So by making these into the legs of this angel, who appears in the 10th chapter, with a countenance like the sun, a rainbow above his head. His body is like the clouds, and he has a book that John is called upon to take up and to eat it. And it tastes like honey, but is bitter in the belly. And 7 thunders utter their voices, And John is about to write it down, but he's told not to write it down, that these are to remain sealed. And I believe that these seven thunders, what they uttered, are the seven unutterable truths that I alluded to earlier, that Rudolf Steiner brought forward at those Paris lectures. Now, as the individual crosses a threshold, thinking, feeling, and willing separate. The same happens through the collective crossing of the threshold. But in this case, it's now involving the whole of humanity, and the Slavic and Russian and Eastern peoples represent the thinking on that level. They're the cloud people that reaches up to this sun countenance. And the rainbow people, the feeling people, are the Central and European peoples. And then the Western people are related to these pillars, the feet that he said you can imagine, one on the Pacific Ocean, the other on the Andes Mountains, and that we have to pass through the middle. And later in the book, the dragon with seven heads arises out of the bush, the waters associated with the Yachin pillar on the ocean. And the other two-horned beast later arises out of the dry land. So the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic arise on either side, and we have to pass through the middle. And there's three forms of occultism that become available. The East has the ability to unfold eugenic occultism related to the birth mysteries. And this is related to the red pillar, the red oxygenated blood, hygienic occultism to Middle European people that are under the sign of Raphael especially, and then mechanical occultism to West, to the Americas especially, where Ahriman plays a role. And Steiner spoke of the Strater machine in his mystery plays. So here I've kind of sought to bring these seven mysteries or unutterable root truths in relation to the seven ages of the post-Atlantean epoch. Each of them are 2160 years, which is a Platonic month. That's the amount of time that the sun is in a given constellation in the heavens. So I don't want to stay very long with this, but in the contemporary age, we're in the Piscean age, where the mystery of evil is in the foreground. And we're looking forward and needing to prepare the future sixth age, where the Logos mysteries will come to the fore, and the birth of spirit self, which the Slavic and Russian peoples especially have been preparing and have a mission to prepare. And this Aquarian age can also be called the Sophian age, where the community impulse will come to the fore. So here is the ideal that willing, the foundations for that was laid in the old Saturn, feeling and the etheric and old sun, thinking in the astral of old moon, and on the earth, the ego stage was given for the first time through the spirits of form. 6 of those spirits of form entered in the 30th year into the Jesus being and lived for 3 years and bestowed the ego on humanity through the mystery of Golgotha. And through that, the golden triangle of Manas, Buddhi, and Atman was given to humanity. And that really gives us our future that will unfold in Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan. But here I'm to begin with just showing the future planet of love, the future sun, Earth. And you can see the foundation stone meditation is related to this communion between human thinking, feeling, and willing. Willing, feeling, and thinking is the way that it goes with the verses, and divine will, and the Father, and the highest first hierarchy. And then, of course, the feeling with the second hierarchy and the Christ being, and then thinking with the Holy Spirit. And through that, we can create this union of the two triangles and the symbol of the Holy Grail. But not all of humanity is ready to embrace this new Christ impulse. And this is where the mystery of evil comes in. That part of humanity that rejects the Christ will, instead of moving towards this future planet of love, will instead help to co-create the eighth sphere. And this eighth sphere is outside of the progressive sevenfold evolution. And this leads away from the divine plan and is rather the Luciferic and Ahrimanic and Azuric beings who seek to create a counter planet. This would be the unholy trinity that has this aim. And here's the golden triangle embodied in these three last seals, Manas, Buddhi, Atman. The Christ laid the foundations for each of these. They're planted in each and every human being, but they're there in a seed-like form, and we have to use them. Here's the 7 stages of Rosicrucian initiation indicated. And I wanted to especially focus on the 5th and the 6th. The 5th, which is related again to these 7 root truths, and the mystery of evil would be related to this 5th stage, is the correspondence between macrocosm and microcosm. And the 6th is living into the macrocosm. The new Rosicrucian mysteries were prepared through a special meeting or council that was called in the 4th century by the individuality who went by the name Mani, as sometimes called Manes. And he drew into this circle the Zarathustra being, who's in later ages referred to as the Master Jesus, who was incarnated as the Solomon Jesus, recounted in the Matthew Gospel, where the 3 kings come. Gautama Buddha, who was there within an earthly reflection. And these 3, with Mani in the middle, representing the ego of the future, preparing then for the future Rosicrucian mysteries. This is the first seal in the middle. And just like the Gospel of John begins with, "In the beginning was the Word," here you have the macrocosmic, cosmic Christ who wields the cosmic logos forces. And although you can't see it very well, let me see if I can I guess I don't really know how to use this magnifying, but anyways, in his right hand are 7 stars, and these are related to old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, Earth, which has 2 phases, the Mars and Mercury phase, and then Jupiter, Venus. So the Christ being in this cosmic dimension rules over that 7-fold cycle. And the first part of the book of Revelation is related to the 7 churches. These are related to the ancient Indian, the Persian, the Egypto-Chaldean Babylonian, the Greco-Latin, the contemporary consciousness soul age, the future 6th age, and then of course the 7th age. But in order for these ages to be renewed by the Christ, an individual representative of those ancient cultures, the ancient Indian, the Persian, the Egypto-Chaldean, had to be raised from the dead by the Christ. And the individuality who represented the Egypto-Chaldean was a being who was referred to as the youth of 9, who was raised from the dead. I believe it's the Luke Gospel where this comes to expression. And Steiner indicated that this being had lived in Egyptian times as the youth of Sais, who is sort of a legendary figure who lifted the veil of Isis and was struck dead. The mysteries of Isis had receded. Osiris had been killed, and the mourning Isis, the widow, became the widow, and these Egyptian initiates became the sons of the widow. So the youth of 9 appeared as the son of a widow, and he was raised from the dead, and later appeared as Mani and began the Manichaean spiritual impulse. And he then later incarnated as Parsival. This is the being, the individuality who leads our 5th post-Atlantean age. And this is the one who called that council that is referred to in this slide that prepared this Christian Rosicrucian stream. And then you have Lazarus being raised from the dead, representing the Persian epoch. This being will lead the Slavic, the future spirit self, the Philadelphia Aquarian age. But this is a mystery that Rudolf Steiner spoke of in his last address. This isn't just one individuality, 2 individualities united in this being. And in this graphic, I'm trying to show these 2 streams, one going back to Elijah and John the Baptist, and the other going back to Hiram Abiff, who represents the Cain stream. And in this union of the 2 Johns, John the Baptist, who had been beheaded, according to indications by Rudolf Steiner, united with Lazarus John. And the 2 then remained united. Lazarus John was about the age of 30 at the time, and he lived to be about 99 years old. So they spent close to 70 years united in that karmic communion. And subsequently, this Lazarus John reincarnated as Christian Rosenkreuz in several incarnations, then as Le Count de Saint Germain, and John the Baptist reincarnated as Raphael, and then Novalis. And both of these led over to the Anthroposophical Society. Now, this is a painting that a whole lecture could be devoted to, and I don't want to spend too much time with it because there is much more to go through here. But let me just say there's 2 streams depicted here. The one on the left, the far left, is related to the Yachim pillar, the red blood pillar, the oxygenated blood. And you have, it's hard to see, but you have Melchizedek, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then leading over at the bottom to the burning bush, and then Moses at the left side looking back at the burning bush with his eyes closed. And above you have then Solomon, the Queen of Sheba, Hiram. And then on the right, far right, you have the woman standing on the moon with Michael and the dragon beneath. That's a stream that comes out of the future. That's related to the Boaz pillar, the blue blood pillar. It's the astral stream that comes out of the future. And both streams converge in the present. But the eternal present, the ever present for Earth evolution is the mystery of Golgotha, which is there in the very middle. And you have the renewal of the tree of life growing out of that cross. You have Christ as the sun being. And below the cross, you have Joseph of Arimathea gathering the blood. And that cup of the Grail is overflowing, and that blood is flowing into the earth. And the three mothers within the earth who represent the soul of old Saturn, old sun, old moon that are carried over to the earth, they are being given the new Christ impulse so that they can be transformed into the future Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan stages that the golden triangle represents. On the right side, we have the initiation of Christian Rosenkreuz in the middle of the 12th century. Here we have the foundation stone up on the right, made out of copper. It's a double dodecahedral device. In the middle at the top, you see a pyrite crystal. There were two of them suspended in the middle of each of those dodecahedrons. And the smaller one was inside of the bigger dodecahedron, and the bigger one in the smaller one. And when this foundation stone was laid, the bigger side of the dodecahedron was oriented to the smaller cupola side in the east, and the smaller one oriented to the bigger cupola in the west. On the left, you see the foundation stone document that was placed inside of that stone. A deep sort of excavation was made, 9 steps that led down, and this stone was consecrated with the hammer that was used in the Freemasonic cultic ritual work, with 3 strikes, then 5, then 7, then 12. Roses, red roses and a white rose were placed on it. And then the Lord's Prayer has a counterpart that's part of the 5th gospel. And Steiner spoke for the first time with this laying of the foundation stone, the words of the macrocosmic prayer that goes, Aum, Amen. Evil holds sway, witness of egoity become free, selfhood guilt through others incurred, experienced in the daily bread, wherein the will of the heavens does not rule, in that man forgot your names, ye fathers in the heavens. And Steiner went on to say that just as the 4 gospels went out from the east and worked towards the west, so there now comes from out of the west the gospel of knowledge. As the principal content of this 5th gospel, Rudolf Steiner then gave the macrocosmic Lord's Prayer, a macrocosmic world prayer, which is connected, and this is important, with the moon and with Jupiter. This has to do with the New Jerusalem, as the 4 gospels are connected with the earth. So this is a seed for the future New Jerusalem that was laid in the ground. It can be seen as a kind of seed out of which the first Goetheanum grew. And here's an image, a painting of the Goetheanum depicted to embody the temple that appeared in the mystery play that grew out of the subterranean depths, and the marriage of the lily and the youth Johannes was celebrated. And formerly the arts could build a bridge to where only certain human beings, the few, could come across. but after the sacrifice of the green snake, and this embodied the renewal of the mysteries, then many people could cross over and participate in this. So that was the house of the word, called the Johannesbau, which doesn't just refer to Johannes in the mystery play, but John the divine, the evangelist, the beloved disciple, who wrote the Gospel of John and the book of Revelation, which is a communion of two beings, as we just heard. Now, the Grail story begins with this battle around the city of Petalamont. And in the way that this book was written, it has 16 chapters. This city has 16 gates, which are related to the 16 petals of the throat chakra. And there are two armies, one, the black army on the left, and the other, the white army on the right. And the black army is fighting on behalf of Isenhart, who has died, who had a diamond helmet, which was open to the spiritual world. And there's the queen that lives in this city of Zazamak. And she represents this new potential. And Parsival's father gets married to her. And her name is Belikani, which is a word game on pelican. So in the alchemical lore, you have the three stages of imagination embodied with the peacock, who has the tail that is multicolored and the iridescent eyes in that tail that represent seeing, waking up in the night. And then you have the swan, who's famous for the swan song, which has to do with inspiration, the word. And then you have the intuition, the pelican piercing its own breast to feed its young. And that's really the Christ mystery that this queen represents. And so the throat chakra, as you know, if you've studied knowledge of higher worlds, 8 of the 16 petals are dormant. So we only have to work on the other 8. This is the eightfold path that the Buddha already inaugurated in order to awaken this chakra that has to do with the mysteries of the word. So the Grail has to do with the forging of the Grail sword, which is the word sword. And this building was the house of the new Logos mysteries, the mysteries of the word. Here are some scenes of the beauty of the inside of the building, the ceiling, some of the sculptural rhythm, metamorphosis, sevenfold, mysteries of time. Each of these were a different wood carved. You might think of the work that went into this during the First World War, while other parts of Europe were at war. Artists from around the world came to Switzerland to help build this. Think of these people who did this work only to have it burned down in a single night. So here you have a picture of Solomon's temple in its floor plan and in a cross section, and showing how it can be overlaid over the first Goetheanum. Now, in that Solomon's temple, there is a cubical space, which was the Holy of Holies. The pillars of the temple are the legs of the temple. The middle of the temple is where the heart forces, the feeling forces, where the altar of incense was, where the fragrance of prayer would rise up, where the 12 showbread were that represented the cosmic forces that that incense was meant to rise towards. The 7-branch candelabra was aflame with the 7 mysteries. but only once a year, the high priest would enter that Holy of Holies, which was all in gold. There were no windows. But at the mystery of Golgotha, the four-colored veil to that Holy of Holies was torn open, was rent while the earth was quaking. And that mystery hidden in that Holy of Holies was opened. And this is really the seed of the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem is the golden city, the future sun earth that's related to the gold that was on the walls of this Holy of Holies. In it was the two cherubim whose wings reached to both walls, hovering over this seat of mercy where the Jehovah being appeared to the Jews who had the mission of preparing the physical body. These are the eugenic mysteries, the birth mysteries that led to the birth of the two Jesus. And so just like the head here in this temple plays an important role, I would like to show how this fifth mystery, expressed by this five-pointed star that is engraved into the entry, plays a role in this seventh seal, the Grail seal. So thinking in the alchemical trinity is related to salt, which appears in a cubical form. And when we incarnate on earth, we enter into the three-dimensional world, the creation of the Father God. That is also symbolized by the cube. The Goetheanum embodies the thinking, the head that was there in the Holy of Holies, in the Temple of Solomon. And this seal has some profound mysteries. For those who wish to study these things, I can share some of these slides. But this, related to this seal, is the Ex Deo Nascimur at the bottom, the In Christo Morimur in the middle, and the Per Spiritum Sanctum Revivissimus. We're all called to help build the New Jerusalem. So here's a floor plan of the first Goetheanum. The foundation stone was laid in beneath where I have that cross of two lines from the seventh or the sixth columns on the stage. On each side, they have a repetition of the six. Together, there's 12. And where the first and the opposite sixth cross on both sides, that's where the location of the foundation stone was beneath. And this can be related to the heart of that new Grail temple. As you remember the foundation stone meeting, the foundation was laid into the hearts of the members. This is for a good reason. And the podium, which represents the larynx, was there where the big and little cupola meet. And behind the foundation stone was the sculptural group meant to be that was never put into position. Now here on the left is a drawing that Rudolf Steiner made that appeared in the first lecture given on December 24th, Christmas Eve, at the beginning of the Christmas conference, the beginning of the lecture series, Human Evolution in the Light of Anthroposophy. And I think it's no accident that Rudolf Steiner gave this imagination that he said really belonged to the ancient Indian peoples who were still clairvoyant in the etheric realm. They experienced their head in relation to the whole earth. And where the earth opened up to the sun in the heavens, they experienced that in relation to where the head opens downward to the heart. So there's this relationship between microcosm and macrocosm. And in the middle right, you have a picture of a cross-section of the human head and showing how the first Goetheanum can be related to the forebrain and the cerebellum, which are behind the forebrain in the skull. And Rudolf Steiner indicated that Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree can be related to Buddha being underneath the cerebellum, which has the shape of a tree that grows and becomes ever more luminous. This is an organ of clairvoyance. And this was related to the small cupola of the first Goetheanum. And the pineal gland would be located where in the cross-section, where the podium was, where you can see that in this next slide. So the podium is related to where the pineal gland is located. And you have the 12-fold mystery of space embodied in the small cupola, and the 7-fold mystery of time in the big cupola where the seating was. And behind you, if you looked forward to the stage, was the red window, which stands alone on the main axis of this building, which has a symmetry down the middle. And this is an image of that window, which I started these slides with. And we have there the crossing of the threshold of humanity and the crossing of the abyss, the need to have the three soul forces separate, and the danger of succumbing to the three beasts in the abyss. Materialism orients us downward. So we have to be very strongly oriented to the spiritual world, not to be pulled down by the consumer society and the materialism and modern science telling us we're just higher animals. And so in the middle, we have the clairvoyant human being who isn't looking out through the senses, but is looking inward. So Rudolf Steiner indicated that not only can we look outward through the senses, but when we awaken to the etheric level, we can learn to look inward. And this red window in the middle represents that. The clairvoyant human being looking inward. And those imaginations we saw earlier on the ceiling, they represent what the seer beholds with this looking inward. Time becomes space. Time appears as a tableau. So here's the Goetheanum seen from the south side. That wing that you see in the middle was called the White Hall. This is where Rudolf Steiner showed the priests how to do their ritual for the Christian community. And it was on the left side of this White Hall where the fire was started. Those who were there on the night of the fire came out of this set of doors to the White Hall. And over on the left here, they found a ladder laying, and they raised that ladder. And up at about head height, there was a hole that was quite large that had been punched into the building by someone who was very familiar with the architecture of that building. And there were leftover straw and fuel residues and the kind of tar that's used for shipbuilding, residues of that were used to ignite that fire around 3 to 4 p.m. that New Year's Eve day. Was placed in a place in the hollow of the walls between the outer wall and the inner wall, where the fire could rage upward into the dome. And this continued to burn during the time when Rudolf Steiner was giving his lecture, the last lecture in that building. He gave a lecture titled Spiritual Communion. Spiritual knowledge is a true communion. And while he was giving that lecture about what the real purpose of that building was, this reverse ritual aspect, a kind of cosmic cultus. That was what the whole Goetheanum was aiming for, this higher form of thinking that could become a communion. And this middle stream, the middle stream that Steiner spoke of for the first time, really more openly on the 28th of September in his last address, which remained a fragment. Sorry about that. This is the middle stream of anthroposophy. Just like you hear about the union of the Platonists and the Aristotelians, this is a more occult and esoteric current that flowed within anthroposophy that Rudolf Steiner kept close to his heart. This is the middle stream that has healed the rift between Cain and Abel. But there are two backward Cain and Abel groups. The backward Abel stream represented by the Jesuits, the backward Cain stream represented by certain members of the Freemasonic stream. And they had infiltrated the society and were aware of what Rudolf Steiner was working towards. This is taken from lectures or talks Steiner gave to a smaller circle after the fire. He said, Hiram Abiff was born as Lazarus, and through that, he was the first to be initiated by Christ. With him, the middle stream was inaugurated, the stream that stood between that of Cain and that of Abel. In the course of time, the Cain stream was represented mainly as F, Freemasonry stream, while the stream of Abel was expressed by the priestly current of the Catholic Church. Both of these streams within humankind remain strictly at war with one another. They only once united in concert in their hate of the middle stream. The result of this concerted action of the otherwise opposing direction was the destruction of the John building, the Goetheanum. Steiner spoke in another place about how the sons of Abel found their way to the sons of Cain when the theologian asked him for the new ritual. That aroused growing enmity on the part of the sons of Abel and the sons of Cain in the outside world. What he meant was the Jesuits and the occult brotherhoods. And he said further that the fire that destroyed the Goetheanum was started in the same hall in which the new ritual was given to the theologians. In contrast to the jealousy of the gods, which led to the burning of the temple of Ephesus, Rudolf Steiner spoke of the jealousy of men. In regards to the burning of the Goetheanum, Steiner usually referred to these members of the backward Cain and Abel stream as brothers of the left. Here we are dealing with the mystery of evil, which, as already indicated above, are of paramount importance in our time. These brothers of the left are guilty of committing the sin against the Holy Spirit, which is said to be a sin that is not forgiven. During the course of that lecture given at the time during the Foundation Stone meeting, he spoke of the connection between the Temple of Ephesus, which was burned down on the same day that Alexander the Great was born. And that, of course, Rudolf Steiner, as Aristotle was incarnated at that time. He became the teacher of Alexander and prepared Alexander's spreading the Greek wisdom throughout the world of that time, and the burning of the Goetheanum, which was meant to renew those mysteries of the Logos and the Word. We know that John the Divine, together with the mother, the Solomon Mary, lived in Ephesus. Here you have the incarnations of Rudolf Steiner that go back to his time as Critolus at Ephesus, before that temple was burned and the mysteries of the Logos were still alive. As Aristotle, he closed those old mysteries. And as Rudolf Steiner, he reopened them. But now, once again, there's a fire that took this building, this temple of the Grail, that was meant to embody these mysteries of the Word, that was destroyed through the jealousy of men. And up above it said, Rudolf Steiner indicated, is an eternal cosmic law that each individual must perform a particular deed repeatedly. He must above all perform a deed, the same deed twice, one time as though doing the opposite of the other. And that's what I believe is embodied in Aristotle closing the mysteries and Rudolf Steiner reopening them. These are the incarnations of Rudolf Steiner in his earlier incarnations, together with the individuality who later became Ita Wegman. This can give you some sense of how important Ita Wegman was in the founding of the new mysteries. So her being ousted out of the society was a major blow, a major setback. And this is why I'm saying that the Christmas Foundation meeting failed. Elizabeth Vrede was the reincarnation of Jacques de Molay, who was the head of the Templar order. So she too was a very significant soul. The architecture of the second Goetheanum was developed out of the speaker podium of the first one. So the word mysteries were again central. Down at the right, there is the card of those who belong to the building, the Bauverein, and that T hammer is the Tao mysteries that Hiram inaugurated, that are related to the Freemasonic rituals. Here you have, if you remember, I spoke of the fifth Rosicrucian mysteries having to do with the union of microcosm with macrocosm. Here on the right, you have the microcosm. Here on the left, you have the macrocosm. And only in the earth shown down below in this macrocosmic Adam Kadmon figure, which includes not only those who are living on earth in physical bodies, but include those who are between death and rebirth, on the ascending and descending. And the moon belongs to the earth. The earth has not just a Christ-imbued earth. There is at the center of the earth a battle that is underway, just like at the center of the head. There is a battle at the pineal gland that I'll speak of. Not only does our cosmos have the heart as its sun, where the Christ left his Atman on the sun when he came to the earth. He brought his life spirit, his aura, into the etheric aura of the earth, and his spirit self to those who partook of the Grail mysteries. But there's also a sun demon His number is 666. This is the true Antichrist. And he too has an organ at the center of the earth where he is vying against the true ruler of this Adam Cosmon to take over this evolution instead of the true rulership of the Christ being. So aside from the microcosmic double, there's a macrocosmic double. This is the greater mystery of evil we need to be aware of. And these are individuals who had a prophetic insight into the emergence of the new sphere, which is a thinking sphere around the earth. Not only is there a geosphere and a biosphere and a watery element, there is a new thinking sphere. And there's a global brain developing. But aside from the shadow thinking, which gives rise to the internet, that has to do with the subnature forces in our thinking, there is the living thinking that takes place in the etheric brain. So this seal represents the fall of human intelligence, which is like a second fall of humanity. Intelligence began with the white horse. Human beings still had the golden crown. They had a bow with an arrow. They still had that straight aim. They thought together with the gods. Then with the red horse, they descended into the blood. Lucifer came into play, and this horseman wields a sword, and there's strife and battles. Then intelligence descended to the black horse, and that rider has scales, and he weighs and measures and count. Ahriman comes into the picture. Death starts to play a role. Then intelligence crosses the boundary from nature into subnature, and you have spectral thinking. You have the pale horse, and the rider is death, and hell follows after him. This is the thinking embodied in the internet, in artificial intelligence, in the electromagnetic fields that make artificial intelligence in the digital universe possible. These 5-pointed star, 6-pointed star, 7-pointed star represent the path of raising intelligence back up again to a new connection to the spiritual world. So here Steiner speaks of how thinking is the same thing experienced inside as light is outside. Light has a fourth dimension, which is inwardness, which is the thought element. Everything in outer nature is woven of gold, of light, because thinking is the origin of everything in the divine plan that was spoken through the word, through the logos. And with higher thinking, with intuition, we can unite with that higher thinking. We can live into that light. And the philosophy of freedom showed us how to do that. But there's another kind of thinking. But there is still a second thing to be considered. What electricity itself is, that is still unknown. They are ignorant of one thing, namely, where the real nature of electricity must be sought. This nature of electricity cannot be discovered by means of any outer experiment or through outer observation. The secret which will be discovered is that electricity, when one learns to view it from a particular level, is exactly the same as what human thought is. Human thought is the same thing as electricity, viewed one time from the inside, another from the outside. So human beings are between these two, the living etheric world that rises up into supernature, the astral world, the spiritual world. On the other time, we have the solar radiations that include electromagnetic fields that enter the earth through the aurora, the ionosphere, the magnetic fields, and the same in our body. The doppelganger is related to electromagnetic forces that are not our true human nature. and Lucifer and Ahriman can enter the human being through that. So here's a picture of the great battle. So just like the Grail speaks of the two castles, Klingsor's castle or the castle of the Grail. We have the two great cities, the city of Babylon shown below, and the New Jerusalem above with the star pointed upward. And the 666 leads downward into the eighth sphere. So that's why we now face the mystery of evil, because we in our time collectively cross the threshold and are prefiguring the future transition from Earth to Jupiter, which will be the Pralaya. So that's kind of a preview, just like in music, you often have preludes. This is a mini Pralaya, a mini crossing of the abyss. And so we need to help to co-create and build the New Jerusalem, which can only be fashioned with this higher thinking, this Michaelic thinking. So here is, at the bottom here, Rudolf Steiner, while talking about the lemniscate to teachers, indicated that this same lemniscatory form can be witnessed clairvoyantly between head and heart. And in the lower arc is the heart, and the higher arc is the pineal gland. And in the etherization of the blood, he speaks of this pineal gland and that it can be the center around which a halo can arise like a golden aura around the head. And he says there that there's a macrocosmic counterpart to this, that the Rosicrucians investigated very in great detail. And so this is what on the right-hand side, this same lemniscate is dynamically there in the cycle of the year. On the left, it's the cycle of the day. On the right, it's the cycle of the year. And the Goetheanum is there between this microcosmic grail and the macrocosmic grail. So it looks like we're at a point where our time is kind of up, and I think we need to give a little bit of rest from my side of the contribution here to open this for some questions. But let me end with this last few lectures here, excerpts. The higher man is nourished by pure sense impressions and the purest mineral substance in the noblest part of the brain. In Manna's symphony, Rudolf Steiner indicated that it's actually in this mineral deposit, pineal brain sand, that the spirit man is situated. And this already indicates that what is living cannot harbor the spirit. The following excerpt is taken from a lecture given in Berlin when man's forebrain developed the organ of the eye, was focused in man's head at the root of the nose. In man, the eye streams out of this place, but it isn't enough. The organ of the ego is developed in man so that the higher self can stream into him to make him into a higher being. We find the organ for this in the pineal gland. Man makes a connection with the divine self in the world through the pineal gland. Based upon these indications and those given in the etherization of the blood lecture, I would propose that the human skull can become either the castle of the Grail or the castle of Klingsor, depending on whether the pineal gland, which can be likened to the stone that fell from the crown of Lucifer during the battle in heavens, is carved out through the development of compassion, as Parzival was called to do, or remained hardened in egotism. Steiner mentioned that the etherized blood of Christ can unite with the etheric current ascending from the heart. However, a true comprehension of the Christ mystery and the mystery of Golgotha is necessary for this to take place. Let me move on to this macrocosmic dimension. that just like there's a battle at the center of the head in the morning and evening, based on whether the two streams are able to harmonize and unite, or if they repulse each other. The same battle is there at the core of the earth. And through the mystery of Golgotha, the descent into hell, the Christian initiation has to do with passing through the first 7 layers of the interior of the earth. And Christ had prepared the passage through the 8th layer, through the raising of Lazarus and the communion of Cain and Abel in that being, because this is where the strife between Abel and Cain was wreaking its dark forces, so that Christ, through the mystery of Golgotha, united with the center of the earth. But there's a battle there for the future of the earth that we can all participate in. And just like there's a day-night battle that was celebrated in this temple of the Freemasonic ritual work, where the altar in the left is the morning sun, the altar of beauty in the south, the midday sun, the altar in the west of the setting sun, and in the higher grades, the altar in the north, the sun at midnight. In this way, it was a work of harmonizing these two streams in the day-night rhythm, the one that comes from the macrocosm, especially at night, and the ideals that we cultivate in the day. Steiner indicates that the idealism in our thinking can lead, if we cultivate it during the day, to a stronger connection to the angel at night. And of course, Christ is coming through the angels, through the Holy Spirit in our time. So similarly, you have this battle at the center of the earth. In these words, Rudolf Steiner spoke of that penetration of the Christ. He said, with the event of Golgotha, when the blood flowed from the wounds of the great Redeemer, when the cosmic heart's blood penetrated the earth and its forces poured down as far as the center, the earth became illuminated from within and light rayed outward into the surroundings. The opportunity was then given to every single human individuality to experience this light within the self. When the earth became the body of the great Sun Spirit, through having been impregnated with his spiritual power, all the beings on earth were equally endowed with these forces. The seed was planted for the reunion of sun and earth. The physical body of Jesus of Nazareth was the mediator through which the power of the cosmos were united with the aura of the earth. And when the blood flowed from the body on Golgotha, the earth was taken up again into the sun power. Since then, this great power streams from its center into the surrounding. And from the sun, Christ's power streams into the earth. One is able to experience this power, this light within oneself as a human being, when one knows oneself to be a part of the earth, which as Christ's physical body is infused with his being. Then the white light streams towards one from within oneself as it streams out from the center of the earth. So this is what we have to be able to call on this battle at the center of the earth. But unlike that temple that I showed you before, the battle for the center of the earth involves the 4 seasonal festivals. Celebrating them are 4 gateways into the sun mysteries that lead over to the center of the earth. And each year those 4 festivals are repeated. And that circle of the seasons can become a spiral if we celebrate them in the right way. So let me end on that note. Perhaps in the future, we could take this a step further, but let me open it to comments and any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you very much, Florian, for your very intense and fruitful presentations. I'm wondering, we are working already 1 hour and 27 minutes, and I think it makes sense to have a sip of water and spend about 4 or 5 minutes for the break and come back fresh with your questions. And also, we shall provide some rest to Florian. Yes, so 4 or 5 minutes, no more, please, friends. And
Okay.
we will be flowing into answers and questions session.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dear Florian, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling just fine.
Excellent. So you're fresh and ready. Dear friends, we are back. We're back.
Florian,
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
At one point, you indicated that the mystery of Golgotha might be somehow negated. To me, that was very disturbing. Could you elaborate?
Well, it's not the mystery of Golgotha itself that can be negated. It's the human relationship to it that can be missed. Like the second coming in the Etheric, for example, is a renewal of the mystery of Golgotha in the realm of the angels. So it was through human beings carrying materialism through the gate of death collectively. This brought about a death of the Christ within the sphere of the angels. And it was by overcoming this death that the second coming began to unfold in the etheric world. So spiritual science is meant to help human beings to connect with this, which is really the age of the Holy Spirit. So the first dispensation is that of the Father. The second, that of the Son. You have the Old Testament, the New Testament. The age of the Holy Spirit is related to the Pentecost event. And this is Christ coming through the angels, archangels, archai, who represented divine thinking. And this is where our freedom lies. And our freedom is bound up with the mystery of good and evil, which is, as I've shown in various places, associated with the mystery of good and evil. So we can choose to reject. And the adversaries, just like the burning of the Goetheanum was an attack on Rudolf Steiner, and Hitler coming in 1933 was an expression of the Zorat, the sun demon, seeking to destroy the work that Rudolf Steiner mediated in Europe, which led to the destruction of Middle Europe, which is meant to be the bridge between Asia and America. That was broken and led to the Cold War, which is like thinking and will fighting against each other with no middle, no European contribution. So this same kind of attacks are taking place now on the level of the whole earth with all these subnature forces which work through our double and through the cosmic double that I tried to express. So we can't be asleep. We have to wake up to this danger and invite the Michael being into our hearts. That's the new rulership of Michael. When Michael let go of cosmic intelligence, it descended where Ahriman could take a hold of it. And everywhere in the modern world, you see the results of Ahriman and Lucifer taking hold of intelligence.
Are you hopeful?
I'm hopeful. That's why I'm presenting this strategy, because we can't rest on our laurels. We can't take for granted that the foundation stone meeting succeeded. I'm suggesting there's evidence that it failed to bring about the realization of the union of the society and the movement. And that as a result, the Michael forces embodied in the society have been substantially weakened. And so we need a plan B. And that's what I have begun to try to share And I think if human beings take up that plan B, which was embodied in the Goetheanum as a Grail secret, then I think there is hope.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, dear friends, there is a suggestion. If you would like to ask a question, please use chat box. And what you should do, just type a little Q. So we will create virtual line who is first, and we will know who is first, who is second, so etc. So yeah, there is a question from Mary Adams. Mary, could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, so thank you, Florian. That was really marvelous. I'm in northern Michigan, and my question is about the Michael prophecy and the fact that there was indication that most of the anthroposophists surrounding Rudolf Steiner would incarnate again very quickly at the end of the 20th century. And in thinking about what needed to culminate by the end of the 20th century, I have wondered if that might have also indicated that there was a necessity for people to get back and be of a certain age by the time we get to these 100-year rhythms, not only of the fire of the Goetheanum, the Christmas conference, Rudolf Steiner's death, but the sounding out of this new mystery of the Christ being appearing in the etheric. And because Rudolf Steiner does give such a specific indication about that 100-year rhythm, particularly in the lectures about Christian Rosenkreuz, and how there's this commitment to hold a mystery for a certain amount of time. And that in this idea that perhaps it looks at the first step that there was a failure, that there's something still that remains that will really of necessity come into our own hands when these 100-year rhythms culminate, but we had to get back very quickly to be of an age to be able to realize that.
I agree where this year is going to be the 100th anniversary of the burning of the Goetheanum. And next year will be the 100th year anniversary of the Christmas Foundation meeting the following year. So we're approaching some very important anniversaries. The indication Steiner gave is, among others, that during the course of a century, the Luciferic and Ahrimanic beings work independently. But as we approach the turn of a century, but especially the turn of a millennium, the Luciferic and Ahrimanic forces work in concert. They work together. And that's what we're seeing. A lot of those who were involved in the New Age movement, who celebrated the internet back when it first was launched as a place for independent expression, everybody would have their soapbox. In the meantime, we see in China how this internet, how the World Wide Web is being used as a surveillance form of technology. The digital yuan that's being launched in China will allow the regime there, which is authoritarian, to have access to every single transaction. They seek to bring morality from outside, which is not in keeping with the consciousness soul. About 1/5 of the world population is incarnated in China. You have many authoritarian types arising in different parts of the world right now, whether it's Russia, Turkey, you have in the upcoming election in France, there's strong right-wing currents in the United States itself with Donald Trump and his hopes to regain the presidency. All of these are signs that the dragon with 7 heads, which has to do with the root races, they showed their shadow at the time of the Second World War with National Socialism. That means they were out of their right timing. They're still more out of their outright timing now. But all these right-wing movements have a regression towards racial, ethnic, and blood orientation, which belongs to the Gabriel age, not to the Michael age. These have to do with building the city of Babylon. The soul of that city is depicted in the book of Revelation as the woman who rides on the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, what we need to orient ourselves to is the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars, clothed with the sun. And what John the Divine was seeing is the whole earth becomes one great city. All of the cities are being linked through commerce, through the internet, through the World Wide Web. The earth is one great city and it has a subnature aura feeding it. But within that same space in the air around the earth is the etheric, the golden aura of the etheric body of the earth, which is Christ's sheath that has been permeated with the resurrection forces and this living thinking. And because we're free, we have to do the knocking on the door with real will to get it to be opened up. And where 2 or 3 are gathered, that is the new approach, where we can prepare a little Pentecost within the community of people that are close to us, where we can have real deeper conversations. So yes, these 100-year anniversaries, the burning of the Goetheanum, the launching of the youth circle, that is being sort of the 100-year anniversary of that. It arose out of young people asking Rudolf Steiner how to connect with Michael. And there were at first a circle of 12 individuals like Ernst Lehrs, etc. I was invited to join that group many years ago, and they have a 3-fold meditation that is really of a communitarian building type, unlike just the individual meditations. So it's worth, because the 2nd and 3rd classes were never given, it's important to go back to the material given in the old esoteric school. I'm sorry if I didn't fully answer.
No, you did. It's interesting, and it's also just in 2030, there's certain other rhythms that are also, I think, in order to get through the challenge and the obstacle that's presented by, excuse me, I didn't realize I don't have my video on, so you can see me, so it makes it easier. But that to get through these, the fire and the Christmas conference and this idea that potentially it failed, and then Rudolf Steiner's death, but then beyond that, we have this experience of the Christ returning in the etheric, that's also coming to its 100-year rhythm. And how do we develop that capacity to strengthen in the etheric, which you were just describing, that kind of golden aura where that Christ being exists. So I think that for me, at least, that carries us through some of these more difficult rhythms or anniversaries. It's hard to call them that, but yeah, thank you. It's a mountain of information.
The 33-year rhythm that Christ inaugurated with the end of the Kali Yuga, with 1900, there's a beginning of the first 33 rhythm. There it's entering, the Christ impulse is entering the will. And that's on the most unconscious level. Then in the middle of the century, the second 33-year rhythm culminates in the 60s. That's where the Christ enters into the heart realm with this second coming. And you could see how there's many people who took up this impulse, but it was very much mixed with these Luciferic forces, drugs, and the like. And then the third culminated around 1999, where it enters into the realm of thinking. But that corresponds closely with the third 666 cycle, which culminates in 1998. And this is the strongest of the 666 cycle, where the sun demon seeks to intervene in human history. And this being is super powerful and works through the Luciferic, Ahrimanic, and Azuric beings in opposition to the hierarchies and the Christ being. And we need to familiarize ourselves with the enemy that is arrayed against us. And if you think of the earth as a global brain, and how much these subnature forces have gained ground just through this epidemic, for example, where all these people were stuck at home, and the sales for all these devices spiked. Most of the big companies like Microsoft and Google and Amazon made huge amounts of money during this period. And the online world expanded tremendously. But what are we doing out of anthroposophy? Yes, Judas had a place at the table of the Last Supper. So we need to accommodate the mystery of evil. Without Judas, the mystery of Golgotha wouldn't have taken place. We need, like the Grail mystery, there's the two castles. And by becoming familiar with Klingsor's castle and the black magical forces, which have a counterpart in the interior of the earth, where a black magician seeks for the ninth layer to unite with these sun demon forces. The symbol of that sun demon is the five-pointed star turned upside down. And those upside down pointed star, they have two horns. And this extends the power of this being outward from the sexual forces. And so we need to learn about white magic to counter these black magical forces. We need to learn how to wield these forces, not just individually, but together through the celebration of the festivals. So when Rudolf Steiner was asked how to connect to the second coming in the etheric by Riddlemeyer, he was told by living into the rhythm and the cycle of the year in a meditative way. So the calendar of the soul is one way to do that. But the seasonal festivals are four great entry points into these new sun mysteries. And if we celebrate those by bringing all of the arts together and bring architecture into that, bring landscaping into that, bring everything we can into those celebrations, then that will become contagious in a good way, just like this virus is contagious in another way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rebecca McGrath, please unmute yourself. Rebecca?
Hi, Florian. So I had a bit of
Rebecca.
thank you so much for your offering. I really felt like you brought things really clearly to vision of the challenges we're in today. One thing that, and maybe you can create a sense of clarity, because on what you were answering, I think it created a little bit of a confusion for me. And it made it sound as if this totalitarian way of working with the internet and taking hold of people and controlling their lives, that it has its place in a good way. For me, I feel like it's the fallen forces working on the earth towards the eighth sphere and taking hold of people and capturing them from one perspective, where we wouldn't be able to develop ourselves freely and fully in the way that you are developing, how the arts are really the mysteries to connecting to the Christ and our spiritual communion through meditation, to be able to make this connection. And it's been a concern for me, because I knew that in these inoculations that there is nanotechnology being put into people. And so it's like, so to what degree should we be uniting with this fallen forces? Because I understood Rudolf Steiner say the way that we transform them so that we don't fall with them into the eighth sphere is that we have to lift ourselves up to the counterbalances in the etheric. So I'm just kind of curious how you view that, and did I hear you clearly that you thought that it was okay that the World Wide Web was the way we connect towards Michael? I think it sounded a little confusing to me what your thoughts were on that.
I mean, I think we can, of course, like we're doing right now, using the Zoom medium, connect to each other, which is, I think, a positive thing. Just like the printing press can be used to print and publish Rudolf Steiner's works, and we can find Rudolf Steiner's works online, which are now more and more digitally available. However, the threefold social order has not been able to come to expression in any way that Steiner had been hopeful since his time. If you don't separate the economic sphere from the political sphere, then you have the elite political manipulation that's going on currently, where you're not treated equally before the law. If you have more money, you can afford 2-3 lawyers, and the poor person can't even afford one, is given a public defender who has too many cases and can't do a very good job of defending them. And the wealthy can use their money to influence politics through various lobbying, and big corporations are very busy doing that as well, to influence the legal system that's in a way beneficial to them rather than humanity as a whole. The same is with the spiritual cultural sphere. Right now, we have the religious right, for example, in the United States playing a big role in the political sphere. That in the threefold social order is meant to be kept separate in a more autonomous way. So we have a chaotic aspect of the three, like in Goethe's fairy tale, you have the mixed king that's made up of mixed metal. That's all going to lead to destruction. This whole economy is going to fail because there's too much greed in it. It's only a matter of time. And so we need to prepare the phoenix that can rise out of the ashes. New words have come into the vocabulary in the last 4 or 5 years, such as the post-truth era, alternative facts. There is so much misinformation. It takes a lot of work to cut through all of that to obtain the truth regarding, for example, this present situation with whether you should be wearing masks, whether you should get vaccinated. Donald Trump is claiming he actually won that election. Others are calling that the big lie. And many senators and people in Congress are supporting that lie, even though in private they know it's false. These are very dangerous trends that are very much a part of our time. So we need to sort through these things. Nanotechnology, for example, and does it really play a role in these vaccines? I would question that. I know it's out there and it's being put out there by various individuals, some of them connected to the anthroposophical movement. But I think there is a danger of mistaken a form of what I would call a pseudo-occultism, which is conspiratorial secrets that people feel they've uncovered with the help of certain individuals who provide them with information that back up these claims, as opposed to discovering the truth oneself through painstaking research and work and cutting through the misinformation. So I think it's very difficult to obtain clear information. There's doctors who are influenced in the Waldorf school who, according to my assessment, are bringing misinformation into that circle. And they're intelligent human beings. They've studied anthroposophy, but nevertheless, it's like Thomas Meyer. I respect his work. I value many of his books, but his book on 9/11 is, to me, that kind of occultism that I think delves into conspiratorial theories that are questionable. So I think within the Anthroposophical Society, with our own circles, we need to, the truth will make you free. Michael requires this very disciplined, living heart thinking that is purified of any of the kind of motives that political parties would engender or have. So I think what the philosophy of freedom, what Rudolf Steiner and his philosophical work, we have to make those kind of efforts of real logical thinking. And science has a lot to tell us and offer us because they are founded on experimentation, but because they're materialistic in their orientation, they can't tell us about the spiritual dimension. And by identifying us with just animals, higher animals, that leads us away. And because they're so strongly involved in technology, it's very impressive. The rocket ships that are going to take us to the moon, to Mars, those all contribute to the death of Sophia. And the internet, the World Wide Web, is really the head of the macrocosmic doppelganger, in my view. That isn't the Christ aura, which occupies the same space, but it's living heart thoughts that are needed to absorb these resurrected thought that the angels will mediate in the form of imaginative picture consciousness, like Goethe was able to embody in his fairy tale, for example.
Thank you very much. John Stephen. John Stephen Vanucci.
Florian,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Could you,
John Stephen, can you make yourself visible?
I can't.
Oh,
I'm
so-
sorry.
Okay.
Florian, you addressed this a few questions ago, but if you could expand on and expound and directly address how the four festivals are done right, how we experience and express and celebrate the four festivals in the right way. You said it was very important, and that if we celebrate them in the right way, we will get the results that we want, or the outcomes that we want.
Okay, so a key importance are periods like the Holy Nights that we recently went through. And there was some great contribution from speakers that were hosted by the Chicago Society, just as this one is. Those are exceptional times. That's, according to Steiner, the festival of inspiration, where we can connect with the archangels in a way that's not possible to the same extent during other times of the year. A child born at Christmas is conceived around Easter time. Easter mysteries are extremely important in as much as it's related to the moving calendar. It's not fixed. It's related to the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox. So it calls upon us to look to the heavens, that this is a cosmic event. And of course, the Grail moon is that Easter moon. And I would suggest, and perhaps in a future presentation, I could go deeper into this, that there are actually 12 Easters, just like there are 12 signs in the zodiac. So far, all of the Easters have been either in the sign of Pisces, like in our time, or the sign of Aries in the previous intellectual soul period. And in the future, around 2035, we'll have the not 2035, it's later. I think 3500, somewhere in that neighborhood, we'll have the Sophian age, the Aquarian age. So that's when Easters will begin to take place with the sign of Virgo in the background. So each time there's a cross, the spiritual beings don't experience time like we do. For them, time is space. So the New Jerusalem has 12 gates. Each of them are of one pearl. The Easter moon is the secret of that pearl of great price that you have to sell all to obtain. The moon is the place where we go through purgatory. The souls spend as much time there in the area within the orbit of the moon as they did within the sleep state in their past earthly life. And they live in their astral bodies, which still have within it the desires, the passions, the wishes that were satisfied through the body when they were physically incarnated, but that's no longer there. The body has been laid behind. And that's why they call it the purging, the burning away of all of those passions and desires and wishes connected with the body, so that we can pass through that moon gate into the lower heavenly region, the lower Devikan. And beyond that, the sun is a gateway to the higher Devachan, the higher heavenly region. But the Easter moon, as I say, there's actually 12 Easters. And for a 25,920-year period, which is 12 Platonic months, all of those Easters will come into play. And it's on that level in a kind of mystery tableau of those 12 portals to the Easter mystery through 12 Grail moons. This has to do with the building of the future New Jerusalem. And so each of these festivals have secrets connected with them like that. So the summer and winter are related to the solstices and equinoxes, the longest days and the shortest nights in the wintertime. These are a polarity. And we need to, like in the foundation stone meditation at the fourth part, we hear about the shepherds and the kings, these two types of clairvoyance. Those situated in the head that the kings had, and those of the shepherds. This was a connection to the Sophia being that existed in pre-Christian times that was dying out. These shepherds and kings that came to visit the two Christ children, they represented the last vestiges of an old clairvoyance that has in the meantime died out. Our materialism has projected into the heavens these weighing and measuring and counting and mechanical forces. Just like Osiris was killed in Egyptian time, now it's Isis has been killed through this type of projection. And the star world is her tomb. The Easter mystery want to open up a new connection to the star world. We have to lift the veil of Isis, Sophia. The Copernican system is true on the materialistic, physical level, but on the astral level, the soul of our universe, the Ptolemaic system is true, where the head is the center, the earth, where the Christ has since come from the sun. And so we need to get in touch with this great Adam Kadmon, this cosmic human being. We have to lift the veil of Isis Sophia and reconnect with our cosmic nature. And these four festivals are a way of doing that. We need to celebrate a new world culture that can be celebrated through each and every one of the arts, that celebrates what's universally human, not a racial heritage, not an ethnic heritage, not a religious heritage from the past, but a new religious feeling that experiencing the divine in each and every human being, and helps to draw that out by being a midwife to the other. So leading up to each festival is a preparation for the next festival. So if you have a community of 2 or 3 gathering, they could then prepare for that next festival. And over time, as years go by, you have a log of that journey of the circle of the year. And eventually that circle will become a spiral. And the spiritual world will begin to take an interest in this little Grail circle, this little sun circle that you formed with 2 or 3 are gathered. And these are going to be the oases across the planet where human beings in this desert of materialism have some life, the water of life to offer. And ideally, we reconnect with the earth, with planting seeds, because the plants teach us about the etheric world. We have to experience the earth as a living being, because the cycle of the seasons is a breathing. In breathing in the winter, a breathing out in the spring, summer. And the 4 archangels are connected with these 4 points of the solstices and equinoxes. They are the guardians of these 4 gateways to the new sun mysteries. They're 4 aspects of the Christ in his second coming.
God bless you, Florian.
Thank you.
And I think it will be the last question from Emery Kimball. Emery, please unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. I cannot hear you. For some reason, I cannot hear you. Okay, try it. Try it again. Okay, I think you got it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. So I had a question. I actually discovered Rudolf Steiner today, and I've done a little bit of research, and I believe I want to take, I think it's pronounced Rosicrucian path towards initiation. So I'm on step 1, and I believe that just means to study, but I'm not sure how to study and like what books to kind of get started with, because this is a lot of information just to receive, and I don't even know which direction to go in and how to make sure what is real and what is pseudo occultism. So what would be your recommendation or tips for a beginner on his path?
Well, I think knowledge of higher worlds and its attainment is a good place to start, because it describes a path that's inspired out of this Rosicrucian impulse that you mentioned. At the same time, it's important to go to Rudolf Steiner's early work, the Goethean Science. Rudolf Steiner spent 15 years editing Goethe's scientific work. And this is part of the reason he called the Goetheanum. Before that, it was the St. John building, the Johannesbau. And more scientists were entering the society. And of course, Goethe developed this theory of metamorphosis. And metamorphosis isn't just taking place in the plant world, it also takes place in the animal world. And Rudolf Steiner showed how it carried over into the human world in the metamorphosis from one incarnation to another. For example, one of the things that I was indicating in this presentation is the importance of the pineal gland. There are 2 organs, the pineal and the pituitary gland in the head. The pituitary gland is a lunar organ, the pineal gland a solar organ. These are like the heads of the 2 Kundalini serpents spoken of in the Sanskrit yoga tradition that rise up and create a new spine, a spiritual spine. and awaken the chakras. But the Western path is to not start from the vital pole at the base of the spine where the Kundalini serpent is coiled up, but rather start from above with a 2-petal lotus that is there in the forehead. Can also be called the wings of the eagle. And this has to do with developing clear thinking and the ability to concentrate. So just like a concentration exercise is like taking a magnifying glass and learning to focus the light of the sun to the point where it becomes a tiny dot on a piece of paper and can ignite that paper into fire. This is what we have to learn to do with our thinking. We have to strengthen it by bringing the heart forces, by weaving head and heart together in the lemniscatory way. And the throat, the word, the larynx is in between. And these two, this is what Goethe did. He was both an artist, where beauty and the aesthetic sense was brought into a balanced relationship with the quest for truth, science, and the quest for truth. Truth, beauty, and goodness complement each other. So the philosophy of freedom is a good place to become familiar with Rudolf Steiner's philosophical work. And there's many other authors who had contributed to Goethean science that can be studied. So it's also a matter of where you're coming from in your own biography. And it's good to find other individuals. Like in Goethe's fairy tale, a key moment, a turning point is when the snake is asked by the old man with the lamp, what is more precious than gold? And the snake answers, light. The old man answers, what is more precious than light? And the snake, the green snake, answers, conversation. So conversation on a higher level where 2 or 3 are gathered is really one of the best ways to cultivate a new connection with the soul spiritual world. Because this promise where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am in the midst of you. This is a true promise that we should take very seriously. And we can then, the new community impulse Steiner spoke of is to be each other's awakener, to see through to the higher in the other and help to draw it out, to see past the shortcomings, the shadow side of another individual, to penetrate to their higher potential and to help to draw it out. This is where little beginnings can be made. And that, of course, study in the way it's meant in the Rosicrucian path is not the usual study. It's the kind of contemplative thinking that Rudolf Steiner expressed in his philosophy of freedom. This is meditative thinking. This is thinking that is enhanced through inner meditative work. It's a philosophy of meditative development.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Dear friends, we are working already 2 hours and 17 minutes, and I think it's good point to stop. And to thank Florian for his super intense, wonderful presentation. And dear friends, please unmute yourself and greet our speaker.
Thank you, Florian.
Thank you for participation.
Well, thank you all for
Florian.
participating.
Thank you so much.
So much.
And my apology for somewhat overwhelming amount of material in a short period of time. I hope you
Come
didn't
back.
get
Appreciate it.
I hope you didn't get spiritual indigestion.
Oh, no.
Thank you so much.
No.
Aloha.
Very well.
Friends, with
Thank you,
permission of
Florian.
Florian, we
It was
will
wonderful.
post the lecture on our website. I mean, with permission of Florian. So you can find the recording on our
May you
website.
speak again soon.
Thank you.
Would be glad to.
Thank you, Florian, again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good day to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Andre.
much.
And thank you very much for being part of it.
Wow.